Hi everyone, welcome. It's 4:30 p.m. It's Wednesday. It means it's time for the office hours here on the ViaMonstra Academy. I'm Johan, Andrew is Andrew, and we'll be your host for the next hour. An hour where we share updates on everything MDT, ConfigMgr, Intune, you name it. And it's also your chance to ask questions on these topics. So, that being said, let's get going. All right, welcome back, Andrew.
Hey there, how are you?
It's a bit too. I'm good, but it's just a little bit windy today, and the windy city, feeling like. But dang,
I would say so. A little chilly.
Even the horses were like, "Can we go back in the stall now? Thank you." No
You
need to
know
be
it's
out.
cold. Yeah, you know it's
Yeah.
cold when they're having a problem.
Yep. They were having blankets like up to here. Nope. Well, thank you. We'll
Oh,
be inside.
geez.
We're good. Just give us the hay. Anyhow,
So,
what's up this week? Well, since our last office hours.
yeah. Couple of big things, I think. So, if you don't mind sharing my screen for a moment, there was some big news surrounding last week. I think I mentioned that when you went to create a Windows app in Intune, we now saw the Microsoft Store for Business had legacy in the title. Well, wouldn't you know it? Earlier this week, we got a new Microsoft Mechanics video that came out, sort of explaining how we can use the new Windows Store for Business that leverages WinGet and its integration with Intune. So interestingly, a lot of talk about this on Twitter, and there was a question asked if we were going to have to wait for the December service release of Intune, and the good news is it looks like we won't. Microsoft expects to have this the rollout completed by the end of this week. I haven't seen it pop up in my tenant yet. Have you happened to see it yet?
No, sir, not yet.
No. Looking forward to trying it out and seeing what we can do with it. It's looks pretty promising.
Yes, indeed.
One thing I did notice, we'll have to find the documentation on it, but I think there are still some issues with using these applications in the enrollment status pages and stuff like that now. But maybe we can talk a little bit about some of the things that we're hearing about it here in a little bit.
Sure.
There was also sort of a big popular topic, I'll say, going around on Twitter last week or the week before. Basically, some Microsoft documentation said that Autopilot devices that hadn't been enrolled for 180 days needed to actually be re-registered in the tenant. I think you may have even mentioned it on one of our office hours a few weeks back. Turns out that was not correct. Thankfully, Microsoft updated their documentation on that, and so that came out last week. I did want to share a link that came out during that time from Peter Klapvik, where basically he was using Logic Apps to report on these devices that hadn't enrolled in 100 days and 180 days, and I think perform some actions on them. And I thought this was just useful. He left this post up just in case somebody might find the flow useful. And I thought there might be some examples in there that people could use for, reporting on this information, sort of get the gears turning on how they might be able to use Logic Apps with Autopilot devices. So just wanted to throw those things out there. But those were the big things for me this past week.
All right. On my end, I stumbled across, it's been known for quite a while, but today is the day that we're saying goodbye to desktop analytics. And Matthias Melkerson wrote a post on that process. I figured I could share that one. So let me close that screen and open this screen. So this is Matthias' post from earlier today, and basically talking about it being deprecated, and also provide some step-by-step guidance for the offboarding process. And I know that you went through with this yesterday, Andrew, in one of your tenants, and it was fairly straightforward as far as I understood it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was. There's just a few. The documentation does a nice job of walking you through all of the things you have to remove. You have a bunch of Azure AD resources and log analytics things that you have to remove, but it's pretty straightforward, as you said.
Yeah, sounds good. And then, of course, has some quite shiny things showing up in not that portal, but in the security portal, where Microsoft announced a firmware assessment for their Defender product, or rather an add-on to one of their Defender product, because it appears still to be a bit of extra licensing involved to get that going. Not right now in the preview, because it's currently in preview, but once it becomes general available, the documentation currently says that it's going to be an add-on for this. So if I go down to vulnerability management, of course, I have my inventory here that haven't changed much. I still see all my different software. I have my devices listed here as well under assets. If I go to one of my devices here and take a look, sure enough, I have information about that one here. But the interesting part when we go back to the inventory is that particular new tab up here, hardware and firmware, which will give you basically how are you on a sort of security state on your BIOS and firmware upgrades. Sure enough, one of my machines, or actually two of my machines, does indeed have an update available for them, where this particular device have a good chunk of weaknesses in whatever BIOS version that machine is on. So surprisingly enough, it took a while for this information to be populated. I just onboarded some of these devices yesterday morning, and they showed up fairly quickly on their devices like they do in Defender. It's usually less than an hour, but it took about 7-8 hours for them to actually show up here. And I think it may have to do with, I actually forced them to do a reboot, and then they showed up shortly after that. So might be something that needs to be detected at boot to get this information in. I'm not sure yet, but that's what I had to do to make them show up. Oddly enough, is that I have a good chunk of virtual machines showing up as well with a compatible BIOS, apparently. Have never seen a firmware upgrade for Hyper-V, but I guess there technically could be one. What made me smile was, of course, that it also showed up my ARM device, my dev kit for ARM64 running Windows 11 64. And we actually had a long thread going on Twitter yesterday on how to deploy it. So that came back to an old post I did just earlier this month that I updated yesterday, because it seems to be a little bit hard to find Windows 11 Enterprise for ARM. And when I wrote this post, I just went into our normal VLSI site and I found it there, because if you have an enterprise agreement, it shows up right away. But if you have a Visual Studio subscription, it doesn't. It turned out, a little bit from Frank Lesniak, who lives here in Chicago also, actually, that inside of the Windows 11 IoT Enterprise ISO, you will find this Windows 11 Enterprise for ARM as well. So luckily for all of you out there who only have a Visual Studio subscription, you can still play around with this, assuming you can get your hands on some hardware that is capable of running ARM. If you go back to the App Store side of things, you shared the video link there earlier. So I just wanted to share a note from Mark Andre that was playing around with WinGet and installing different applications that seem to be little control these days on how to deal with the reboots. And after a little bit of research, it came to light that sure enough, there is an ongoing discussion or issue on the WinGet client where basically there are requests to have suppress reboot on default and rather opt in to do things in terms of reboot if that's the case. The challenge is obviously it will be up to the application installer to support this, that there are certain installers out there that doesn't do well with reboots, but at least when those are being prepared for WinGet, there should be a way to control that. So that's basically the request. Otherwise, you may be in for a surprise, and the machine suddenly just reboots under you with like no warning, no nothing.
Yeah, I know I would be.
I wanted to share. We post these links as usual on the YouTube channel afterwards, but this was just the visual documentation around this, which had some interesting stuff in the end regarding group policies that you may have to configure for this to be okay in your environment. And this was what you mentioned earlier also, Andrew, that currently ESP pages are not supported, but hopefully down the road they will be.
Yeah, I think that gained some traction when people notice that, because we often have like the company portal app being installed at that point. So seems like that could potentially be a big issue, but I guess we'll see.
Yeah, my poor little dev device. It's so sad. Can't
Yeah.
deploy ARM. Yeah, we'll see. Hopefully that will be added as well. We'll see.
Mm-hmm.
My final, but like how to say it, last but not least, is obviously tomorrow is our big day for ConfigMas.
Yay!
Video, yay! One video every day until December 25th. Demo something, showcasing something. We did that 2 years ago, and time for it again. Maybe we did it last year as well. I don't remember. Anyhow, it'll be fun. It will be fun.
Awesome. I love the image you did there, the render.
Thank you, sir.
Very, very cozy looking.
Very, very digital, very 3D. All right. So let's see. Do we have any questions coming in?
I haven't seen anything. Doesn't look like we have anything in the queue so far.
All right. Let's see if something shows up. We do answer questions as usual in the channel. So if you have any, by all means, ask away and we'll be happy to answer. I did check that the stream was live earlier on my phone, so I know it's out there.
Mm-hmm. Same.
But of course, we are closing in on the end of the year. A lot of organizations are busy trying to finish up all the tasks for the end of the year, and not to mention all Christmas preparations for people celebrating that. It's obviously December is usually a busy month, and we are pretty much as close to December as you can be at the moment.
I would say so. Just a few more hours.
A few more hours. But while we're waiting for any questions to come in, Andrew, I know you stumbled across some updates on, Teams, basically.
Yeah, there was the what's new in Teams for November post. I can go ahead and share that.
All right. Let me get rid of that one and bring up this one.
Figured this would be worth sharing. A lot of us use Teams, so some cool little additions this month. Looks like some instant polls, one-click instant polls during meetings, which could be useful. Some changes to the 7x7 video in the gallery view. Some device changes. Basically, looks like suppressing video streams of in-room participants and things like that, sort of just to improve these experiences on the Teams rooms equipment. Just a few other things it looked like in here. Accepting or blocking group chat invitations from unmanaged users, which if you have that enabled in your tenant, I think is pretty useful. And scheduling to send a message is pretty awesome, I think. Oftentimes, I don't know about you, Johan, or those watching us, but there's sometimes I want to send a Teams message, but I don't want to quite bother the person right at that moment, and I know it'll take them away from whatever they're doing. So I'm happy to see that feature, as well as starting a Teams chat with distribution group, mail-enabled security group, and O365 group. A lot of organizations I work with leverage these quite a bit, so it's nice to see those. Just one limitation here. Group chats and Teams can only allow 250 members max. So if any of your groups have more than that, it looks like that'll still be a challenge. And this was a big one too for me. In the activity feed now, there is a toggle that only shows unread activities in your list. So that was a nice little quality of life improvement I noticed about a week or so ago. So that was about it. Just worth sharing that, I thought.
All right, excellent. We actually did have a question coming in that, for whatever reason, did not show up in our chat function in the software we're using, but it did show up in the live feed on YouTube. But anyhow, not sure why that happens, because it usually shows up in the central chat. But anyway,
yeah.
The question was basically around PowerShell script to basically update the VPN configuration or VPN client, and want to use Intune to deliver that to all company workstations so they have the right settings. That was actually something I started on writing a blog post a while back ago. I just didn't have a time to finish it. Let's see where I might have put up that info. It wasn't too terribly complicated, but it's very easy to run script as Win32 apps in Intune. I probably got sidetracked with something. Happens every now and then. Let's see if I can find something there. Let me take a quick look around. Probably started somewhere. But basically, Intune, like ConfigMgr, supports the use of, in ConfigMas it's called baselines, in Intune it's called proactive remediation script, where you basically look for a certain configuration, and if it doesn't match what you are wanting it to be, you go ahead and have that proactive remediation corrected. Let's see if I can find that script. Otherwise, I have another example I can show that I've been using in the past. So let me just check this one real quick, and then I will go ahead and share the screen.
Sounds good.
No, I did not find that one. All right, let's do this instead. Where did the screen sharing go? There is Andrew going away. There is me coming up. So basically, here is a very similar concept where one of our agents that I work with pretty much every day is having an XML file that stores configuration in it. So it's basically a conf file, it's an XML format, but there is a string in that file that needs to be told what particular VPN solution that is being used. It can be correctly detected, and so the client can change behavior when someone is connecting through a VPN or not. But this is just an example of having a config file that looks a certain way, and you want to change something or make sure something in it had changed to match something clever. So this is the discovery script. It basically, okay, this is what it's supposed to be. And then we load in the value or the XML file, and we take a look and basically, all right, does it look good? Yes or no? And not only do we return the compliant state to either Intune or ConfigMgr, we also have some logging going on. So if you want to troubleshoot further, you can do that. So the log file for this one is right here. So if I run the discovery script here, it's going to tell me that this one is not compliant. And if I open up the log file, sure enough, it noticed that the current strings are Citrix VPN and Cisco Connect, but it should be only Cisco AnyConnect. That is obviously not okay. So this one will return as non-compliant, and if you enable remediation, that will also trigger the remediation script, which is a very similar script, except that this one will actually go ahead and update the config file with the desired value. So, and that means that obviously it will return as compliant after one has been configured. So this is sort of the concept. And when adding these in ConfigMgr, these are just a traditional baseline setup. One baseline will hold one or more configurations. So here's the VPN strings baseline, and you can see that it does indeed have one configuration item. It has one script in this case, and this was the discovery script I showed. This is the script that fixes it. On the Intune side of things, we can discuss the location for it, but proactive remediation scripts are in endpoint analytics or reports and endpoint analytics, which is obviously where you go to find scripts. Doesn't make sense to me, but anyhow. And here I have another example where we are looking for a branch cache configuration. Because even machines that are being managed with Intune, they actually have a lot of content peer-to-peer using branch cache and bits, because you guys will be surprised how much traffic are actually using bits still to this day. But anyhow, if I take a look at this script, it follows a very similar method. There is a detection script, so this would be the ConfigMgr discovery script that does something, in this case, looking for certain configurations of branch cache and report non-happy, non-compliant if these settings are not true. And of course, there is the equivalent of the remediation script that will fix those settings and address the configuration and then make it happy again. So that is pretty much what you have to do in Intune. You have to have a discovery script, detection script that figures out the configuration, and the other one to actually fix it. So I hope that answered that question.
Very cool stuff. Yeah, these can be so powerful.
Yeah, it's fun. I was playing around with HP Connect the other week, which is their integration with Intune for BIOS and firmware settings. And sure enough, their platform, when configuring things, they will actually create proactive remediations here for this. So this was a proactive remediation that I did not create, but HP created for me from their platform, but it shows up in my tenant, obviously. And in this case, this one is making sure that my BIOS configuration is the way it's supposed to be. So in the HP Connect case, if I go to admin.hp.com and log in there, this is where I have my policy, but I can go ahead and create a new policy demo and select either a BIOS setting, BIOS update, authentication for their security platform. But I pick BIOS settings and hit next. It's going to be for a specific model. And I'm going to pick one of the models here, like a G6 notebook. And then I can configure the different, settings that I want to have on the device. And when I'm done with that, I can go ahead and apply that to a group, or I can also do that afterwards. And for example, this one here that I did the other day, this setting here, I did assign to a group in Intune, named this, that I obviously had added my devices to. And sure enough, the proactive remediation kick in. HP sets it by default for 1 day or daily, but you can change that if you don't like it. But it's a very same concept. It's a great idea to be able to do that or this.
Very cool.
I think there was a follow-up question as well. How to copy files from a server to workstation through Intune. Depends. If you by server mean Intune itself, you can just create a Win32 app with the files, and you deploy that as a regular application, and it will you simply have a little script that copies the file, a command line. So that's fairly straightforward. If you're talking about copying from a local file share to a device, then it's just basically a script that does that copying. The challenge is the same as you would do this in ConfigMgr, is that if you run this as system, the computer object must have permissions to read the location for where that file happened to be if it's a local file server. If you store the content in the Win32 app up on Intune, you don't have to worry about that because that content is always copied down locally to the machine. I have a lot of packages like that where I just applications where it's basically just a content holder for a lot of files. All my peer-to-peer test applications are that way. So here is a 2 gig package that just has a bunch of files in it. And the installer is just a PowerShell script that do whatever I wanted to do with those files. And if all I wanted to do is copying them, then I have a script that copies them, because that script is going to be in the path of the package when the script runs. So I can easily figure that out in PowerShell. Great question. Let's see, was there something else coming in?
Yeah, I've got a question on YouTube. Do you use, without Intune, do you use Modern BIOS Manager to update BIOS of computers?
Every day of the week. It's a fantastic solution. Absolutely, yes. We showcased it probably like 5 times here on the channel. So if you look in the old videos, you will see how we go through this. And actually not a shameless plug, but a plug nonetheless. And the reason it's not shameless is obviously because it's free. But I did convince Mike Terrell and Morris Daly, and Morris Daly is one of the lead developers behind that entire solution. And we have on December 8th, we have an 1.5 hour long session, or we actually scheduled 2 hours so we can include some Q&A, but an 1.5 hour long session that we will go through how we can manage drivers and BIOS through ConfigMgr, MDT, and Intune. So that'll be a lot of fun. If you want to sign up for that one, the price is just right. It's free for the community, and it's a pretty good deal.
I'll say so. Looking forward to that one.
All right. See, there was one more follow-up.
Yep.
No, there was a different question.
Yeah, do you force reboot or let BitLocker suspend and wait for the user to reboot by himself later?
In what particular scenario?
Presumably for a BIOS update?
So if using sequences for it, that would be a good step to put in before you do a BIOS update or a BIOS setting, because depending on your BitLocker settings, BIOS can be picky when you do changes to it. Some BIOS updates and BIOS settings works perfectly fine, others simply doesn't, and then the user has a nice little recovery prompt when they reboot their computer and have to type in a 40-character long recovery key. So since we are using sequences, or at least I am using sequences primarily to do BIOS updates even, it makes perfect sense to have a step there that suspends BitLocker and reboot and do the update. Or update and do a update and then reboot.
Good deal. And yeah, there was just a quick follow-up. It was about BIOS updates. He's planning on using PSADT with a notice that a reboot will be triggered at the end.
Yeah, I mean, there are options, and PSADT is a good example to use Service UI to pop up a little notification. You can also do notifications down to the notification bar in Windows if you really put your heart into it. But it's a nice solution, definitely. And especially if you go down the rabbit hole of doing firmware upgrades, where depending on your hardware vendor, you may actually be needed to have someone there to type in the code or just press a key after reboot in BIOS, because not all vendors, not all models have the capability to remove the restriction for physical presence. Many of them do, but not all of them. Especially older machines may have that requirement.
Makes sense. Another question coming in. We have an application that uses Internet Explorer and, as you know, reached end of support, and now this application doesn't work on Edge. What GPO makes Microsoft Edge direct this application to reload in Internet Explorer mode? Trying to think. I haven't had to configure that myself, but I know that there are some posts around configuring, what is it, site lists?
Yeah, site list, yeah. To force them to go into a specific mode, basically like an IE rendering mode.
Mm-hmm. Let's see if we can find something here.
And Nope have a good post on doing it through Intune. I've seen some other posts earlier also around it.
It looks like Ben Whitmore's got one from 2020.
All right.
As well. So basically you have to have an XML file, it looks like. And within that XML file.
Do you have it up on the screen?
Yeah, you can share my screen for sure.
All right, yeah.
So, unless this has changed since 2020, if it has, I can't imagine it's changed a lot. But from what I gather, you have to have an XML file where you as an admin define the list of websites that need to load, as Johan mentioned, in IE mode. So you create that list, and then, use it, configure it with a configuration profile in Intune. And then you said, I think I saw the one you were talking about, that Anoop has.
Yeah, the only difference there is he's using the settings catalog.
That's what I was wondering.
That option. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's probably where you want to go.
Yep.
Did you find that link there?
Yep, I'll pull it up. It's exactly my question, was whether they were using the settings catalog or not now.
Yeah, I sure are.
Cool. Somewhere around here. There we go.
Yep.
So it looks like these are the settings you'd be looking for, and these would point to your XML file. Cool. I'll make sure I grab these 2 links, Johan.
Beautiful. All right. All right, let's see. Don't see any other questions at the moment. We still have a whopping 20 more minutes to go, so if you have any questions, by all means, ask them.
Well, not related to ConfigMgr or Intune, but the new Willow show starts tonight.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Star Wars is over, so I have to do something else. And Willow was one of my absolute favorite movies as a It's been a while, but still great. Still great.
Absolutely.
I'm looking forward to that. Yeah.
Same. It'll be cool to see that world again. Hold us over until Mandalorian in February.
Exactly. It takes us through. Yeah, it'll be fun.
Uh-huh.
I was hoping that the new Ted Lasso would start as well, but I didn't see a date for it.
I am ashamed I'm ashamed to admit I still have not watched it.
Andrew.
Maybe I'll put it on my list for this weekend.
There you go. Approved.
I've heard nothing but good things about it.
We watched the first 2 seasons, and it's good.
Awesome.
It's hysterical. All right. But I do not see any more questions coming in. Well, actually, just because I said that, one showed up.
Usually it works.
Hi guys, have you been involved on managing Dell command updates by ConfigMgr? I have personally not. I've seen it being used by organizations, but it's not something I have played around with myself. I do most of my updates through the modern BIOS management platform, because that one supports Microsoft, HP, Dell, and Lenovo. So I can use the same platform for every type of configuration. And I'm looking very much forward to see what Microsoft come up with next year to simplify that part as well. So we'll see. We'll see.
Agreed. Same on my side. Pretty much what I've been using.
It was a thank you for the Dart integration tutorial. You're most welcome. It was fun to write. I should do that as the first ConfigMas video. A good demo as any.
Yeah, that would be a good one.
Yeah, good inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
So, starting strong.
Definitely.
All right, then. Let's see. I see something coming in from Troy on LinkedIn. Basically, as the hint on, or a tip, friendly tip on the, there is an ADMX file as well to set these enterprise mode settings through group policy if you're using a legacy Active Directory. So absolutely, yes. Thank you. All right, then. I think we're going to end with a friendly reminder that on our sister channel, Deployment Research, we're starting up our ConfigMas tomorrow. So daily videos until Christmas. And other than that, thank you so much for joining, everyone. Thank you, Andrew, for helping out. And I'll see you guys hopefully next week. Thank you.
Thanks as always for having me. Have a great rest of your week, everybody.
All right.